Hello, everybody. I think you're all being let in by our lovely behind the scenes Nat Giffney. Welcome to Water Smart Homes and Neighbourhoods this afternoon. My name is Christy Spire, the team leader of Nature Education here at Green Adelaide, and excited to have you all online with us today. Ngadlu Tantanti, Ngadlu Ghana, Yatanga, Imparenti. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Ghana land today and we respect their connection to this place. I'm 4 stories up. I'm not sure where you are, but just take a small moment to remember where you are in place this afternoon before we dig in. And we really appreciate working with our local Ghana elders and leaders in caring for country here around Adelaide, as I know that many of you do. So thank you again. This is the 6th instalment of our seminar series for 2024, which we run to help share the great work happening to make Adelaide cooler, greener and wilder and more climate resilient. And we know that we don't do this alone, we do it all together. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Green Adelaide YouTube channel. You can also access all the different seminars that we've done over the last 18 months now on our channel. You are invited to ask questions at any time by putting them into the chat or the Q&A section now on Microsoft Teams, and we will answer as many of those as we can at the end of the session. Today's session, we are very pleased to welcome Belinda Dohring, Program Manager of Water Sensitive SA. For those that don't know Water Sensitive SA, they're dedicated to enhancing water sensitive urban design across all sectors, fostering a culture where WSUD, that's what it's the acronym is sounded as, is recognised and embraced. So Belinda will discuss innovative strategies at both the property, neighbourhood and catchment levels to optimise rainwater use and reduce stormwater flooding. With changing weather patterns leading to larger but less frequent rain events, smarter water management is more critical than ever and can help to sustain urban landscapes and support targets in the upcoming urban greening strategy as well. So we've all got lots to learn and lots to act around. So thanks so much for taking us through today, Belinda. So Belinda will have 40 minutes and then at the end we'll have the question time. So you can pop your questions anytime into the chat or at the end. And we welcome all types of questions and we'll follow up after the session if we don't get to you all as well. So please ask away. Awesome. I'll stop sharing, Belinda, and I'll let you take control.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, today for joining us. As Christy said, I am Belinda Dohring. I'm the Program Manager for Water Sensitive SA, and I too am standing on Ghana country today, and I would like to pay my respect to their enduring cultural connection with the land and waters and their spiritual relationship with the country, especially the country we're going to be talking about today. I wanted to just start by talking about what is water sensitive, what does water sensitive mean, and it is a little bit about, part of it's about the natural water cycle and thinking about how water moves through the landscape in all forms to provide water to our natural environments. And it's also about how we manage our water in the urban environment and the water that we produce from the way we've constructed our modern cities. And we sort of bring that together to try and design and improve our city. So we're bridging the gap between that natural cycle and the changed urban environment. So that encapsulates all of what is being water sensitive. So today, I'd like to also shout out to our Water Sensitive SA partners. So we are co-funded by a range of local government partners and Green Adelaide and other institutions and members who we work with collaboratively on a whole range of integrated water management and water sensitive urban design projects and knowledge. And we also have a range of strategic allegiances and alliances with other departments and SA Water and associations that all are wanting to improve and adopt water sensitive urban design approaches to the work that they do. So I wanted to kind of start big today, and I wanted to start by saying that we all live in a catchment. So when I'm thinking about water and me as a single person here on the globe, I'm also acknowledging that I live also in multiple water catchments, and it's living on this globe, you can't sort of escape from living in one at all. So it's part of where we are. In Australia, we have major drainage basins. And it's interesting to note that South Australia has 6 of these huge water catchments that cross our border, even though we are known as the driest state and the driest continent. Our rainfall here in South Australia drains into more basins than anywhere else in Australia. The southwestern plateau, which is part of South Australia there on the western side, has an annual rainfall of around 200 millimeters a year. So it's that's one of the driest catchments we have. It discharges into the ocean down there in Esperance in Western Australia. And many of the water resources in this catchment come from the groundwater system, although water is pumped all the way from Perth to Kalgoorlie to supply the township there. And that township also uses extensive wastewater. It has a reuse scheme to irrigate its parks and playing fields. And then to the north, we've got the Timor Sea basin. So just a little tiny part of South Australian land contributes to that water catchment. The rainfall in that catchment is around 750 millimeters a year. Although in some parts of that basin, they only get about 400. So there's a huge diversity of the land that makes up that water catchment area. It extends all the way across to Broome, and it also meets the sea in Darwin. Almost 52% of the Timor Sea basin is actually nature reserve, so there isn't much urban development that's going on in there, and it has that seasonally rainfall pattern in the tropics, so it's hot and wet in the summer period and then dry through from May to October. So the soils in the Timor Sea basin are generally wetter and contain a lot more moisture, unlike that southwestern plateau, which of course contains the Nullarbor, which we all know is dry and dusty. So if we move down scale a little bit, and we think about just that, the River Murray Basin that contributes a lot of Adelaide's water resources, that is separated from the east coast by the Great Dividing Range. So the rainfall that falls over in Tamworth and Armidale comes across and down and eventually flows right into South Australia. There's also tributaries up there near Toowoomba, the Condamine River, and then the Lachlan River from Sydney and the Murrumbidgee. And so they all sort of converge around that Mildura Wentworth area. There's a the Medindi Lake storage system in this area, and the basin contains the Macquarie Marsh Ramsar wetlands as well. So this basin supports 2 million people that live and work in there, and generally the population centres are around the alluvial plains of many of those major rivers that contribute to the Murray-Darling system. And 75% of this catchment is actually agricultural production, as opposed to, I guess, the Timor Sea catchment where it was a lot of nature and unurbanised area. The landscape is dominated by vast inland plains and areas of hills, and it's almost all lower than 200 metres above sea level. So for the last 32-year period, the average annual rainfall varies. The average rainfall is about 400 millimetres, but it varies from 300 to almost 800 millimetres. And then if we look at the rainfall and the system flow from the Murray River in the last few years, we've had 3 years of La Nina events. So the rainfall records have changed substantially. Normally there's around 8,000 gigalitres of river inflow, but in 2023 this was twice as much. And the water storage capacity, the storage capacities were like up around 85–90%. So a lot of that water then flows into South Australia, and we were receiving inflows of around 7,000 gigalitres a year, in 23-24. It's pretty extreme, some of the rainfall that we've had over the last few years. And then downscaling again to the Adelaide floodplains. So we have 5 water catchments in the Western Mount Lofty Ranges. They all drain from east to west into the Gulf St Vincent. And much of this water we catch up in the upper catchment in our reservoirs and dams in the Adelaide Hills. And collectively we call that our watershed. So these reservoirs are usually surrounded by dense vegetation and forests, and I guess that helps to improve the quality of the water that runs off, reduces sediment and pollutant loads that require more chemical treatment. Otherwise, it's a natural filtration process, I suppose. Adelaide's one of the only places where we allow agricultural production within our watershed, and we need to make sure that it's fit for our city drinking water. So we have the EPA that regulates a lot of that activity that occurs up in the watershed. And then downstream of the watershed, we've built our cities and suburbs on those Adelaide plains. And we have underlying aquifer systems as well that provide groundwater in the local Adelaide region. So this is an old map of the city of Adelaide with the properties, the suburbs sort of delineated on it. And this would have been the original kind of watercourse arrangement when European settlers arrived here in Adelaide. So we have major watercourses such as the Karawira Parry that comes through the centre of Adelaide, and that's supported by creek tributaries from 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th creeks, known as sort of seasonal creeks, I suppose. We have the Glen Osmond Creek that comes down through the parklands and would have gone out into and joined the Keswick River. So this is prior to major development in Adelaide. This is how the watercourse system would have worked. The River Torrens never met the sea. It would spill out into a large coastal marshland or swampland area that actually stretched for quite a distance from sort of around Karolta Park all the way north through to West Lakes. And then from the south you had rivers and creeks like the Sturt River and Brown Hill Creek that also came down through the Mount Lofty Ranges and spilled out over the land in those western suburb areas. And then along the coast, we had a large coastal dune system. So that kept all the water from spilling out into the Gulf. And so there was a really big swampy paperbark vegetation community through that section of Adelaide. And it would feed into the Port River system originally before we had a lot of urban development. And then if we're thinking about our own house and our own property, we live in our own catchment. Our house acts as it would in a larger catchment with rainfall that gets diverted into tributaries and creeks, which would be your gutters and downpipes, and flows downstream or infiltrates. You can capture your water, you can transfer your water, it replenishes your lawn. And I suppose during the millennial drought, people with rainwater tanks actually were able to utilise their water and keep their gardens alive. So the other interesting thing about your home catchment is that it's a place where you also import water. In the natural catchments, they tend to transport water around and move water, but don't usually import and export water directly. So your mains water taps bring water into your house, and your sewage system discharges your wastewater into oceans. And you also export stormwater from your property out into nearby creeks. So we've modified a lot of those catchment systems over time during our occupation and urbanisation of Australia and Adelaide and the suburb that you live in. And it's interesting the impact that's having on our water resources and environment. And I think that's why it's such an important topic to talk about. Water is directly linked to our livability and our prosperity. So it's important to understand how we are impacting our water catchment systems and how we can make them more water sensitive. So we've modified our water basin systems for storage. And we do this because when it doesn't rain, we need the water available at any time. So we store the water in these large reservoirs. We've got Lake Argyle there in Western Australia. Lake Argyle is actually the largest inland reservoir that we have. It's 21 times the size of Sydney Harbour. And that dam, the Ord River Dam, is 99 metres high. It actually has a storage capacity of about 11 million megalitres. And this provides security to the townships and the irrigation and the farmers across northern Western Australia. So we dam it to provide security for our homes and businesses and our stock. We also transport water a long distance. The Murray River Pipeline in South Australia takes water from Morgan all the way to Port Augusta and all the way from Swan Reach down the Yorke Peninsula to Edithburgh. In my lifetime, the Murray River Pipeline supplied 97% of Adelaide's drinking water in low rainfall years when our upper catchment reservoirs were low. That was before we constructed the desal plant. So we pump the Murray River water into storages ready to drink, and it provides us with ongoing water security. We've also got lots of locks and weirs, and we regulate the flow of the entire length of the Murray River from the east all the way across to the west. We store our local water in reservoirs as well. This is Kangaroo Creek Reservoir in the upper Western Mount Lofty Ranges. We store it up in the catchment. Adelaide is quite flat, so our water comes from up in the hills. These are obviously owned and operated by SA Water, and they report all of the water storages on their website. We catch local rainfall in dams as well up in the Adelaide Hills. And again, you can see the expanse of vegetation around these reservoirs to improve or enable that natural infiltration system to continue to occur and provide us with good quality drinking water. The volume of our Adelaide reservoirs are on the SA Water website. You can see, this was a week or so ago, that our reservoir level was at about 46%. Sorry, I've just lost my place. We treat and chlorinate it, and now we pump a lot of that local catchment water right across the city now that our reservoirs are connected to each other. And I just wanted to talk a bit more around the Karawira Parry River as a local water course. I suppose it's the first place that sort of Adelaide was settled back during European visitation. The Red Gum Forest was also a very important meeting place for Ghana, and most likely at the time of European arrival, there'd probably been some good rainfall, and the watercourse was looking like it could sustain a nice new colony. But this watercourse was actually only ever an ephemeral winter creek. In summer, it became a series of pools and ponds that probably wouldn't have been a good choice for establishing a new capital city. When they declared Adelaide as put their shovels in the ground, the most important thing for the new colony, I suppose, was drinking water. And this river was a vital resource. If you owned a water cart business back in those days in Adelaide, you were very busy and wealthy person, they would cart water out of the river to homes and nearby businesses using bullocks and drays. They also used the Karawira River as a sewer drain, and many of the businesses upstream of Adelaide would discharge their pollution into the watercourse directly, including things like tanneries and butchers. And then much of the riverbank was also used for timber. So the trees were cut down and used to construct buildings, and then the sand in the banks were mined to make bricks and gravel to create roads and buildings. So in 1836, Europeans arrived in Adelaide, and by about 1843, the river was in quite a dire strait. You had all of these different uses along the watercourse trying to get the colony started, and it was creating a toxic pollution. The environment along the river Karawira had been so modified, it didn't actually resemble the densely vegetated or ephemeral Winter Creek that it once was. When the rain began in those days, it still came down from the upper catchment. We didn't have dams up in the hills as yet. And there was extensive flooding recorded across Adelaide in the 1840s. The bridges over the Torrens were washed away multiple times, particularly where Morfett Street Bridge is now. That connected the city to North Adelaide. That was a quite important transport corridor, and it was washed away multiple times. So was the Hackney Road Bridge. And in 1848, there was another huge rainfall event, and the Port River flooded, and many homes and businesses were washed away at that point as well. So as the city expanded into these different areas, the flood waters that came down the Karawira and spilled out into those Adelaide floodplains became quite a nuisance. I suppose it cost them more and more to repair their crops and their farms and their roads and their bridges every time it rained. In 1880, they erected the Torrens Lake Weir, and I suppose it had two purposes. It would stop water from flooding downstream into suburbs like Myland, but then created an ornamental lake. So back to my random drawing of the City of Adelaide. So when the floodwaters became more and more of a nuisance in the western suburbs in particular, and people started expanding housing development down that side of town, there was a call to deal with the stormwater nuisance that was continuing. And in about 1930, they built an artificial channel at the end of the Karawira which drained it straight into Gulf St. Vincent. And that's what Breakout Creek is now called. This opening cut through the coastal dune system at Henley Beach South, and effectively disconnected that swampy paper bark area in the south from the Port River environs in the north, and it drained the land, which is what it was designed to do at the time, I suppose. And much of the land was reclaimed for things like the airports and golf courses and residential development. We've also been changing and modifying our urban environment by using pipes to convey stormwater from hard surfaces. So as we've been building roads and streets, we've been creating drains and channels to channel the water away from our homes. We've engineered it to reduce flooding, and most of it now goes directly into the coastal environment at certain outfalls like Patawalonga and the Port River. And there is one last small remaining piece of vegetation of that paperbark swampy area down at Patawalonga, the Pat Creek. I'll talk about that in a little while. But that contains the last remaining endemic patch of vegetation in the Adelaide Coastal Plains area. So we've made some pretty big modifications to our catchment, particularly in the Adelaide Plains, as we've been going along. And the stormwater systems that we have now in Adelaide are a major infrastructure, and a major component of our flood mitigation measures across urban areas. I guess the future challenge is around climate change and the rainfall intensity that may bring. Stormwater systems and the drainage network are owned by local councils. Across the nation, the replacement cost of this infrastructure is about $94 billion. About $5 billion worth of stormwater infrastructure is in poor condition, and about $12 billion worth of this infrastructure has poor capacity, which means it's not serving the purpose for which it was designed. We're connecting more and more hard surfaces and drainage areas to these systems that they weren't necessarily designed for originally. We've got more impervious surfaces now. We've got more concrete, more paved roads, more roofing. And every time we increase this and we connect to the stormwater system, we're sending our water down drains and pipes and into local watercourses and creeks. Most of the stormwater system that we have now is, getting on to 80 to 100 years old. So it's going to be costly, I suppose, to replace a lot of this infrastructure. We're also modifying our coastal waters environments. We're exporting wastewater into the ocean. We're importing seawater to subsidise for our drinking water supplies. We're increasing our water security, and we're creating climate independent supply systems. But the sewage outfall, we're contributing high concentrations of pollutants and nutrients into our marine environment. The discharge from some of our Adelaide treatment plants is known to have caused the demise of our seagrass meadows that occurred in Gulf St. Vincent. And that, of course, then has the impact of coastal erosion and marine degradation as well. There are multiple sewage treatment plants along the Adelaide coast, and there's about 8,000 kilometres of pipes which pipe our sewerage to these facilities for treatment. Stormwater, there's thousands of kilometres of pipes of stormwater as well that connect into local creeks that also discharge our stormwater into the marine environment. Since the recycled wastewater scheme at Glenelg began operating, they've used about 25 billion litres of water through that system. It was a $76 million initiative back in 2010 at the height or just after the millennium drought, I suppose, and which impacted very negatively on all of Adelaide with extreme water restrictions. So there's now this network of pipes that take our wastewater down to the Glenelg treatment plant. It's treated and then it's piped back up towards the city of Adelaide, and it is used to irrigate the Adelaide Parklands and multiple facilities, including the Royal Adelaide Hospital, Bowden residential development, the Royal Adelaide Hospital, I said that, and it also supplies Adelaide Airport. There's a number of other councils and communities along that network who now tap into that wastewater pipeline scheme. There was also a wastewater pipeline scheme in Virginia in 1997, so that provides water from the Bolivar treatment plant out to the agricultural areas in Virginia and supplies them. So we're also continuing to modify our urban environments. We're changing our urban form, and apologies if anybody recognises their house in my photos. It's not my intention, just some random selections that I've chosen to demonstrate today. And I suppose this change in urban form is occurring on a number of levels. We're generally increasing the area of connected catchment, rainfall catchment, to our stormwater network. Previously, the house down in the bottom corner would be usual of a large scale allotment with a big yard and a small house, and mostly the stormwater downpipes wouldn't actually be connected to anything. They might have had a rainwater tank, but people don't generally have those anymore. And we're actually changing the way we design residential dwellings. We're splitting blocks into two. We're adding more roof area. We're adding more driveways. There's less garden, and even when we're looking at new homes, the homes are bigger, covering more of the land. We're not allowing the infiltration back into the soil of the water. So it all runs off into our water catchments and contributes to that stormwater and flooding issue. We particularly have issues, I suppose, where we have a convergence of water courses down at the Padawalanga and other areas that tend to rise in flash floods pretty quickly. And we're increasing our demand for water with, more people, a higher population with automatic machines. Most houses now have multiple bathrooms and multiple showers, as opposed to what we may have had previously. And so we're increasing the amount of wastewater that we're generating and flushing out to sea. So all of this modification of our water catchments, I suppose, comes down to how we have changed the urban water cycle. So previously, before there were homes and people living in Adelaide, the natural water balance would have been, it rained, it infiltrated into the ground, the trees evapotranspired it back out into the air, and there was some runoff. And when we've created our new urban environments with pipes and hard surfaces and drainage, the precipitation stays the same, but where that water goes and what happens to it along the way has changed quite substantially. And what we see from that is poor outcomes in terms of marine environment damage and watercourse degradation and stormwater pollution. So water sensitive urban design is trying to restore some of that balance back, reuse water where we can for fit for purpose activities, reduce our consumption, and recycle water as much as possible. So I guess my message is that we can be more water sensitive, and we are being more water sensitive, which is really exciting in my world. And I would really encourage you to know your catchment, to pick a day where maybe it's raining and see if you can find the local creek in your area. Often it doesn't look like a creek. It might look like a large concrete drain, or it might be hidden and just be a small bridge between houses. But the catchment is still there in our urban environment. It just doesn't look like it would have as a natural watercourse. Think about the water in the catchment where you are and where it may have come from. So if you're standing at Goolwa, the water at Lake Alexandrina may have travelled all the way from further north than Brisbane. That blows my mind to think that that's the case. If you're at Henley Beach South at the beach, the water coming out of Breakout Creek may have come all the way from Mount Torrens. It could have even come off the roof of Adelaide Oval or just up the road off the Tapley's Hill Bridge. So I would encourage you to go out and get to know your local watercourses, walk along the Field River or the Para River. Have you ever been to the Onkaparinga Mouth where it meets the sea at Port Noarlunga? There's still so much of the catchment and the water natural systems that are around that you can experience. It's also important to know what's in your neighbourhood. Walk around your local streets. You might actually notice things that have been installed to rebalance the urban water cycle. And these are water sensitive urban design features that are doing multiple jobs. They're increasing greening, they're preventing stormwater pollution, they're providing habitat for birds and animals, and they're improving water quality going out into the marine environment. So this is Pakapakanthe wetland in Vic Park. It's part of the Brownhill Keswick Creek Stormwater Project. 6 councils and the Stormwater Management Authority have invested in this project to find ways to reduce flooding. So once upon a time, we may have modified this with pipes and drains, but using a more water sensitive approach, we have amazing spaces like these wetlands. We also have projects such as the waterproofing the West. So this was a major project to improve water security in the western suburbs. It was a $75 million project funded by Charles Sturt Council, Port Adelaide Enfield, the state government and the developers of St Clair to divert water out of the River Torrens and treat and store it, and also harvest stormwater from the local area and then use it for irrigation of open spaces and wetlands. So these types of systems are around in different areas. You've of course got the Salisbury wetlands, which is one of the oldest and first schemes of its kind like this, and you've got the Oaklands Park wetland, which also diverts water from the Sturt River, cleans the stormwater through natural water systems and then pumps it for irrigation to local reserves. So projects like this really do demonstrate how we are being water sensitive, but there's also the benefits of reducing household water bills if the water is being used locally, how we're reducing that discharge and the nutrient load out into the marine environment, and then of course creating these beautiful places in our local neighbourhoods. It's quite a complex, it's still an engineered solution, but it's using the natural systems to perform much of the tasks. Water sensitive urban design is always not very obvious. You may walk past things and not know what they are or realise how they've been especially designed to be water sensitive. So this is Holland Street in Theberton, and underneath those trees and roads are these large structures which enable stormwater to be absorbed through the permeable paving and then supply and support the trees in that street. So there's a lot of work that goes into these projects. It obviously takes more money to construct because it's not simple, but again, the benefits that we can achieve by being more water sensitive are absolutely magnified. This project was a couple of $1 million to install, and it is paying dividends significantly in terms of greening and shading, amenity and stormwater management. You may have seen a street side rain garden. These are another water sensitive urban design approach in neighbourhoods, where it's effectively a very efficient vertical wetland that collects the stormwater. The plants in the rain garden and the soils act to remove pollutants, hold the water, prevent it from just running straight into the side entry pit, and then the water is absorbed into the soil, or on really rainy years, it overflows back into the stormwater system, but it's now clean. And I have funny conversations with people about these in the street. Some residents are a bit confused by them because they've got these ugly, strappy plants, which are really important because of their fibrous root systems. They do all the heavy lifting when it comes to nutrient load. But people complain that these spaces also collect rubbish, which I think is fantastic, because otherwise that rubbish is being washed straight down the drain and straight out into the ocean. So if you see a street side rain garden, you can have some more appreciation for how much work it is actually doing. Curb inlets, these are popping up everywhere, which is great. They support street trees by diverting that water in the curb. Behind the curb, there's a small pipe and then a vertical container that allows the water it fills up and then it infiltrates into the soil and provides water supply for that nearby street tree. I think many of us have probably seen water running down the gutter after a short rainfall event and thought, oh, I wish it had gone to that tree. Well, that's exactly what these curb inlets do. It allows that infiltration back into the soil instead of runoff. There's different forms of street tree infiltration. City of Burnside install these pods. They are a storage unit that you wrap in fabric. It looks a bit strange, but it's a great solution to allowing all of your stormwater to feed the street trees. And they actually take the water off the house and drain it straight into their pods. And then any overflow goes back out onto the street. So they're catching it before it goes out into the council drainage system. So in the Resilient East region, which is sort of Adelaide, Tea Tree Gully, Campbelltown area, there's 245 of these pods. And then there's another almost 1,000 by now, probably street tree inlets that are all diverting that rainfall into the ground for trees. We have detention basins. Sometimes these are a bit more obvious that collect large rainfall events, trap silt, improve water quality again with the reedy plants that trap nutrients and use them up. This is after one rainfall event. So if I go back, you can see the rock gabion wall in the background is probably a couple of meters high. And in one rainfall event, it's already full and overflowing. So a lot of that silt and sediment will be managed. That's a reasonably new one, so it's got a few years to improve its greening, I suppose. But these detention basins are really useful. Porous surfaces, again, these are not always obvious. There's pavers that can allow water to infiltrate or percolate down through the soil. There's asphalt, and there's now councils who are preferring to use these materials on their footpath because it takes the water down into the soil profile. So a standard paver on your street creates condensation between the paver and the subsurface, and that's where the roots of the trees like to go to collect water. With these types of permeable pavement systems, because the water is draining further down into the soil, the tree roots chase it down, and then you don't get those footpaths that are all kind of wobbly and jiggly all over the place. So another good multiple benefit from water sensitive urban design features. And then, of course, there are other wetlands around which are trying to restore the urban water balance and, I suppose, replicate that swampy Melaleuca paperbark area that there once was across the Adelaide Plains. So I would encourage you to have a look in your local neighbourhood, see if you can find these features, or I'm sure if you start to see them, you'll notice them everywhere and have some great appreciation for the work that they are doing. One place I would encourage you to go and visit is the remnant Pat Creek, which is that last portion of the last remnant area of the Adelaide swamp lands, and it's been protected because it's an airport property, sort of touted as part of a third or fourth runway for Adelaide Airport. So it was locked away for a number of years and no one realised it was there, but it contains the last stand of the Melaleuca paperbarks and kangaroo honey myrtle and blue bush. And it's a fabulous, beautiful place that's been lovingly cared for over the years by volunteers. It's a great spot to go and feel like you're back in time. So now a bit what you can do, I suppose, to be water sensitive at your home. Again, apologies if this is your house. But you've got to think about your property or where you live as its own water catchment. Do you know where your drains and your pipes flow to? Are they connected together? Is most of the water from your property flowing into the stormwater, the community stormwater network out onto the road? You're losing a really valuable resource straight off your property. In this example here, there is a grate right next to a tree in the garden, and I'm pretty sure that all of the water that's coming off this catchment, being the roof and maybe some of this paved area, is running straight past that tree, which I'm sure would appreciate a great drink to be more water sensitive. Then you don't have to use potable water to water that tree. So it's a good way to think about how you can rebalance the natural water cycle in the urban area. You can install downpipe rain gardens around your home. Importantly, the vegetation, again, is what works here to remove pollutants and improve the water quality. There's lots of videos, there's lots of different design options, but you can create your own rain garden in your own space. You can obviously catch and reuse rainwater in a tank. It's important to know that you probably need to size your tank appropriately. A huge tank isn't always best. You need a tank that's constantly being used, and so that's why a lot of tanks are plumbed to water appliances like toilets, because they're constantly being used and then constantly being refilled, especially over winter, and that gets the most out of that investment. Being water efficient, selecting appliances with good water ratings, reducing the amount of water that you're consuming, but also reducing the amount of wastewater that you're discharging. And of course, support water reuse. So that's reusing treated wastewater for all the other types of irrigation or water uses that is that you can around the home before you sort of take to using fresh potable water. So we've been working together on being more water sensitive for a long time. Water Sensitive SA has been working in this space for around more than 10 years. We work collaboratively with our partners, and I think it's going to be more critical as the climate changes to understand how we can use and conserve water resources across stormwater, rainwater, wastewater, and fresh rainwater. We work to build understanding around how to be more water sensitive, how to deploy water sensitive urban design features. Our partners, we share knowledge and experience together, so we're learning from each other and utilising each other. We also work with research institutions and help translate what they're learning into tools and information for the community and for our council partners and for the technical experts, so that they can adopt that into the work that they do. And we also support on-ground projects and deliver community communications, I suppose, about being water sensitive. So thank you. I think I'm a little bit over time, but yes. Thank you. If there's questions.
Yeah, there are a few questions for you, Belinda. Thanks so much. I'll start with the challenging one, and then we can go to the other ones. Lots of kind of practical questions there, and I think probably some parts of the end part of your presentation help to answer those for some people. But just a question around, and I know that there was a lot of work in the early years done around the WSUD becoming legislated a little bit more into developments. Has there been any progress on that, or are we, still kind of dependent on developers to do the right thing at that kind of built stage?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there are definitely some elements of WSUD that are being more easily adopted than others. So dual pipe systems where you're importing that treated wastewater, the purple pipe, into your home. So Lochiel Park, places in Mawson Lakes, residential developments already have those third pipe systems in their homes. So I think that's easy for people to get their head around, and easy for developers to, I guess, make it cost effective to use that water source. It's usually cheaper to encourage than potable drinking water. So that's helpful. Often the struggle is around understanding how the water sensitive urban design features kind of work together, and it can be quite simple, and it can be a lot more complex in terms of you've got one water sensitive urban design feature, and then you might have a large lawn soakage area, but as soon as you put in a rainwater tank and diverter, it actually prevents you from maximising that water. So it can be really difficult, but as a systems approach. So I think people want their homes to be designed in that way, and there are products and services available, but there's still a bit of a gap between that knowledge and then legislating it. It's slow. I mean, we've sort of leaning towards legislating people connecting their stormwater system straight to the council drainage network, but we're not necessarily legislating that you need to keep a certain portion of that water on your own property. So not quite there yet, but slowly.
Is there a way that people can get involved in advocating for that at all? Are there any channels for that at the moment, or not really?
I would always encourage people to share their thoughts and ideas with their elected representatives. I mean, they're the ones that are making the decisions. When you're looking to buy or build your own home, I guess customer desires can drive builders to do things differently. You may find builders that take a water sensitive urban design approach, have a niche network or like a niche offering more than your stock standard homes. So people can ask. There's no reason why it can't be done. People just need to ask for it to be done, and that some of that consumer demand will drive change.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you. There's some practical questions. I think some people have helped someone answer one of those. So I might leave Jodie's question there and we can follow up with a few more details after that. I think, Nat had a question around how to get the water into, reaching the soil profile in urban landscapes. And I think some of those solutions, like the permeable pavings and that kind of thing, is you noted. But there was also, so if you've got any other solutions that help keep the water in the soil. There's also kind of a related question from Peter Stokes, who was fortunate in having built at Lockhill Park, and he's interested in what lessons have been learnt from the UniSA studies made from the water recycling initiatives in this project. So I think there was the reuse of rainwater to hot water systems, the use of recycled water, like you mentioned, for washing machines, toilets and gardens. So do you have any insight into that research, Belinda, or should we look into that after the session?
I was going to say, I'm not particularly familiar with that particular development.
Research,
I do know that it had all of those multiple facets to it, and it's a good case study.
Right, yeah, Peter,
we'll see. But I'm not familiar with the details.
Follow up with those studies that have been done since the development was done. And just more of a general question around water sensitive SA's role in involving residents in WSUD projects around verges and rain gardens and reserves. Do you have any current project, like community-based type projects? I know that Green Adelaide does support a lot of community groups to get involved in local projects, but we haven't had too many specific ones at the moment. But you might have more insight into water sensitive SA's work in that area.
Yeah, so we don't have like a volunteer group or a volunteer program. Our partner councils that we work with do, though. So yes, if you go and talk to your council members or your council staff about what's going on in local streets, then I'm sure you can get involved. I'm sure, if you're interested in a rain garden at the front of your house, they'd be keen to talk to you about whether it's possible or what else is going on in your neighbourhood that may be part of a water sensitive urban design project. We've got a map on our website where you can see there's not all the projects, there's a lot on there. There's still many more that are missing. But if you ask your council where you can get involved, that's probably how it would best work. They're the ones that are doing the work on ground. We're just helping them understand how and the benefits that come from water sensitive urban design.
Fantastic. And I had one question that relates to Steve's question there as well, around rain gardens on private land for people. Is it still the case that you do need to get those plumbed in properly? And do you know if there's a good network of plumbers, I suppose, that are also pro WSUD now a few years down the track?
I don't know any specific. I do know that my colleague who sits next to me, or that I know, he had asked for a rain garden to be installed next to his lawn area, and he's been very excited because it's reasonably new. We've had quite a lot of rain lately.
Yes.
So he did a bit of research, and he helped the plumber and the landscaper kind of figure out how to make it work so he didn't flood his house. I think that that's probably just an important thing to remember, is that you can't discharge your stormwater into your neighbour's property and
Yes.
cause nuisance. So if you can retain it on your own property, that's the best way to do it. And also think about when it rains a lot. So we've had quite a lot of rain in the last few years, and you sort of need to make sure that your system is prepared to overflow in those high rainfall events and not cause nuisance or flooding to your own home, I suppose. It's just an important thing to remember.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's why it always felt a little bit complicated. And so to, have a few people in the know-how. So, good to know that some more are happening on private residential land as well, so we can all learn from each other. Another question here from Daniel. We have a small-scale wetland water recycling system to clean nursery runoff for reuse, and the wetland plants are brush cut and composted, removing excess nutrient salts. Do wetlands like the oaklands and those larger ones have a similar maintenance requirement? And also, do they have an anticipated lifespan?
Well, the lifespan is really directly related to how much pollution is discharged into the wetland. So, and how much maintenance you actually so because natural systems tend to improve and not degrade, so your vegetation grows and does more work, as opposed to maybe a pipe that over time cracks and leaks. These sorts of natural assets have to have a completely different mindset in terms of maintenance and life cycle. So you would have to remove the silt and the sediment at some point when the levels got too much. I mean, we have to do that in local watercourses too. It's directly related to what's coming from upstream. So in some cases, if you've got a new residential development and you've put rain gardens in the streets and it all looks lovely, and then you've got people building houses and the land is empty, void of trees, and there's a large rainfall event, all that sand and silt washes into the drainage network and smothers that rain garden, potentially within the first year of its life. But if you've got protection of that rain garden, or it's in an established suburb, you don't end up, destroying it quickly. So they can perpetually go on for many, many years. I don't know whether the Salisbury wetlands have ever been completely cleaned out. I'm not sure what the time frame is for that, but you're looking more than 20 years if it's still functioning as it should be.
Fantastic. That's a great example. And we've got a few more questions on there, but unfortunately I'll have to leave them for today, and we'll follow those up in the email after that we send out to everybody. And if you've got any more questions, of course, contact Water Sensitive SA or ourselves. And fantastic to hear about some community planting days and some Green Adelaide grants with WSUD elements in them happening around the place as well. So thank you all for joining us today, and particularly thank you to Belinda for pulling together all your knowledge into a presentation. We know how difficult that is to tell that large story of water and then to draw it down to what we can do in our own backyard. So you did that very well today. Thank you so much. And we will send up a follow-up email. Our next session, just before you go, is in the series is bringing platypus back with our wildlife ecologist Liberty Olds on Wednesday the 21st of August, and I'm sure that will be a very popular session. Everyone's got a lot of interest in the lovely platypus. Liberty will share insights from recent scoping studies that have been undertaken and the work underway to reintroduce this iconic and much loved animal. So we look forward to having you along there. We'll make sure that we get another link out to register, and please share with your networks and encourage them to follow up watching on YouTube as well. So thank you all, and stay warm tonight. Look forward to catching up at the next session. Thanks so much.